My name is Claire. My father skipped my wedding because I married before my perfect sister, and by the next morning, my job, my reputation, and my family were all on the line. If you've ever been punished for not waiting your turn in your own family, tell me your story in the comments. I was answering emails from my kitchen table in Austin, one hand on my laptop, the other tapping replies to the family group chat about seating charts and arrival times. The contract on my screen needed one more review before I sent it back. The coffee was already cold, but the morning still felt manageable. My phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. Richard Morgan. My father never left voicemails unless he wanted to avoid a conversation. I pressed play. "I'm not coming. You should have waited for your sister." That was it. No greeting, no pause, just a clean decision delivered before 9 a.m. I stared at the phone until the screen went dark again. Another message popped up in the family chat almost immediately. This one from my mother. "Let's not make this harder than it already is." At the hotel, everything moved faster than expected. The front desk upgraded our room without being asked. Someone offered to handle last-minute changes at no cost. A manager introduced himself twice, shaking my hand like we'd met before. I thanked him, assuming we were just lucky. In the bridal suite, my mother avoided the mirror when I walked in. An aunt adjusted a chair that didn't need adjusting. When I asked if anyone had heard from my father, the room stalled. "Everyone knows your sister's situation," my aunt said. "Your father's trying to keep the peace," my mother added. Another cousin leaned in and whispered that it was probably best if I didn't push him today. The zipper on my dress was pulled up, then checked again, like the problem might be there instead. My phone lit up with an email confirmation from the hotel. It thanked me for being a valued partner and listed services I hadn't remembered requesting. The address field included my work email, copied alongside my personal one. I flagged it to deal with later. In the hallway, someone finally asked why my father wasn't coming. He told them I rushed things. When pressed, he mentioned something about relationships and expectations, then slipped and said, "You know how these partnerships work." No one questioned it. They just nodded and moved on. The ceremony chairs were already set. The first row had a single empty seat on the left. The coordinator asked if it should be removed. "No," I said. "It makes counting easier." The planner laughed, not sure if I was joking. Messages kept humming. Cousins, a family friend, each one careful, sympathetic, firm about patience. The phone stayed in my hand as makeup finished and music started outside the doors. Behind the doors, voices shifted, chairs scraped, and the officiant cleared his throat. My grip tightened on the phone, not to answer anyone, but to keep it from slipping as everything started moving at once without warning. Someone touched my arm and said it was time. I stepped forward, the screen lighting up again with another reminder to be understanding as the doors began to open. The messages started before we finished unpacking wedding gifts. Not congratulations, clarifications. My phone kept lighting up with names I recognized too well, each one carrying the same careful tone. "You know your dad meant well. He was just trying to protect your sister. You didn't have to rush things." None of them asked how the day actually went. By Monday morning, I was back at the office. The building looked the same, but conversations stopped half a beat too late when I walked past. Someone had shared an article in the internal chat about our firm's partnership with a downtown Austin hotel. It wasn't negative, it barely mentioned me. Still, my name sat close enough to the headline to feel exposed. A colleague leaned over the divider and said, "Congrats, by the way." Then, quieter, "Busy weekend, huh?" At my desk, an alert flagged incoming emails tied to the wedding. The subject lines were polite, the content wasn't personal. Each confirmation listed discounted services routed through our partner system, not retail bookings. The same hotel, the same manager, all of it processed as if the event belonged on a spreadsheet I'd signed off on months ago. Daniel stopped by with 2 coffees and no commentary. He set one down and scanned my screen without asking. "That's not standard," he said. "What isn't?" "Those discounts, they're corporate." So they don't just happen. He didn't defend me or suggest confrontation. Instead, he asked for access to the folder where I dropped everything wedding-related: emails, invoices, text confirmations. He nodded once, like someone confirming a hunch, and told me to keep every version. At lunch, my phone rang again, an aunt this time. Her voice carried the same script as everyone else's. Your father was humiliated. How? He felt ignored. By who? You know how you can be. The call ended with a reminder to apologize before things escalated. No one mentioned the voicemail. No one mentioned the empty seat. Back at work, another article surfaced. This one referenced family ties in passing. Still harmless, still noticeable. A manager asked if I wanted to step out of a client call, just in case. The phrasing landed carefully, like it had been rehearsed. Daniel texted from across the floor. Your dad's been calling people. How do you know? Someone asked if you always blur boundaries. That evening, the family chat revived itself. Richard's version of events arrived through forwarded messages and side conversations. He'd been patient. He'd been forced into a corner. He'd skipped the wedding to teach responsibility, not to punish. A cousin wrote, "He's really hurting." Another added, "Maybe say sorry so this can end." The word end came up often. It usually meant quiet compliance. Later, while reviewing timestamps, one email stood out. A confirmation sent the morning of the ceremony. My work address sat neatly in the CC field, placed there by someone else. I hadn't requested it. I hadn't noticed it then. Now it felt deliberate. Daniel read it twice. "That's interesting," he said. "Is that the word you're going with?" "It's the polite one." The next call came from my mother. She spoke slowly, choosing every word. "Your father thinks a family meeting would help." "When?" "This weekend." "To do what?" "Clear the air." Clear the air. The phrase landed like a deadline disguised as concern. She mentioned where. She mentioned who would attend. She didn't mention whether anyone planned to listen. After hanging up, another message arrived. This one from a family friend who hadn't spoken to me in years. "Be the bigger person." It struck me then how efficiently the story had been rewritten. By the end of the day, my role was clear. I was the problem to be resolved. The fix was simple. Apologize, reset, pretend the voicemail never happened. Daniel closed the folder on my screen and said, "Don't explain, just document." The calendar invite for the weekend meeting popped up a second later, already marked as important, while my phone vibrated again with someone else asking when I planned to make things right. The system log didn't care about feelings. It just listed dates, approval chains, and account numbers in a neutral font that made everything look intentional. The hotel contract sat there under my company's name, signed weeks before the wedding, flagged as a partner event. No bridal package, no retail rate. The discounts matched exactly what we offered long-term clients. So the front desk upgrade wasn't kindness, it was protocol. Daniel leaned back in his chair and said, "That explains the manager." "What manager?" "The one who kept acting like you were supposed to know him." The realization didn't arrive dramatically. It slid into place, quiet and precise, like a drawer finally closing all the way. The hotel had treated me like a representative, not a bride, which meant someone had set it up that way. My phone rang before I could say anything else. Richard didn't waste time. "You need to stop digging," he said. "Digging into what?" "You know exactly what I mean." The call wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "If you make this messy," he continued, "people might get the wrong idea about how you do business." "What idea would that be?" "That you don't understand boundaries." The word landed carefully, like he'd practiced it. Another call came in while he was still talking. My mother. I declined it. The silence on the line stretched just long enough for Richard to notice. "You're mixing work and personal life," he said. "I didn't," I replied. "You benefited from it." That was new. Not an accusation, a conclusion. After hanging up, the family messages resumed. now coordinated. An uncle suggested letting Richard handle the situation. A cousin mentioned reputations being fragile. Someone else asked if it was worth damaging the family over a misunderstanding. No one asked who signed the contract. Against Daniel's advice, I reached out to the hotel. The manager answered on the second ring, voice steady and polite. "Hi, this is Claire Morgan," I said. "Yes, of course," he replied immediately. I asked about the contract, not the wedding, the partnership. "We processed everything through your firm," he said. "Who initiated it?" "There was an introduction. We assumed your family was aware." The line stayed open for a moment longer than necessary. He waited, like someone realizing he'd said too much, but standing by it. "Thank you," I said, because that's what people say when conversations turn useful. 10 minutes later, Richard called back. "I heard you spoke to the hotel," he said. "That didn't take long." "They reached out to me, concerned." "About what?" "About confusion." The word confusion had become his favorite. It covered everything without admitting anything. "You're making things harder than they need to be," he added. "For who?" "For everyone." That included him. He just didn't say it out loud. By evening, the pressure shifted. Messages from relatives softened into warnings. Friends suggested staying quiet until the family meeting. One even joked that weddings always bring out weird behavior, as if this were about seating charts instead of contracts. Daniel forwarded me a screenshot from a colleague. "Your dad called our office," the message read. "Asked if you usually handle events like this solo." I didn't respond. There wasn't anything to say yet. At home, the folder on my laptop grew thicker. Each document pointed in the same direction. Someone had acted early, deliberately, and with enough familiarity to avoid scrutiny. The timing lined up too cleanly to be accidental. Another call came in from Richard, this one shorter. "You should apologize this weekend," he said. "For what?" "For pushing back." The phrase stuck, pushing back, as if asking questions counted as aggression. After the call ended, an email notification popped up. A forwarded message from the hotel, looping in a new address I hadn't seen before. My work address had been removed. The family meeting invite refreshed on my calendar, now marked urgent. As the screen dimmed, my phone buzzed again, this time with a text from my mother, asking if I planned to come ready to make things right. The email arrived just after lunch, forwarded by legal, with my name in the subject line, and a tone that didn't bother with pleasantries. A formal complaint had been submitted to one of our partners. The allegation was clean and specific. Misuse of position for personal gain. The sender was Richard Morgan. Human Resources called 5 minutes later. "We're placing you on temporary leave while we review this," the woman said. "How long?" "As long as it takes." Access was cut immediately. My screen refreshed and locked me out of everything I'd opened that morning. The badge on my desk stopped working when I tested it out of reflex. In the hallway, conversations stalled again. This time, no one pretended otherwise. A manager avoided eye contact. Someone else offered an apologetic smile that didn't reach their eyes. Daniel met me near the elevators. "He went nuclear," he said. "When?" "This morning. He attached exhibits." Exhibits. The word felt heavy for something that started as a wedding. One of those exhibits turned out to be the email confirmation from the hotel, the one copied to my work address instead of my personal one. The same message I'd flagged and ignored while adjusting my veil. Legal had highlighted it, yellow and neat, as proof of overlap. That CC was the setup, Daniel said, so the mistake wasn't a mistake. No, it was placement. My phone rang again, my mother this time. "Your father didn't have a choice," she said. "He filed a complaint. He was protecting himself." That was new. Not protecting the family, himself. The family group chat went silent, then reappeared with individual messages instead. An uncle wrote to say this had gone too far. A cousin suggested I should have thought about consequences. Someone else asked if I'd consider making a statement to smooth things over. No one asked why my father knew exactly how to file a complaint that would trigger an internal review. By mid-afternoon, the story had settled into a shape people understood. A dedicated father, a daughter who blurred lines, a company doing the responsible thing. It was clean. It was believable. It left no room for nuance. Daniel didn't try to fix it. He pulled up a timeline instead. "This wasn't emotional," he said. "What do you mean?" He didn't lash out. He waited. He documented. He escalated. The word escalated landed differently than angry. Security asked for my badge before I left. The guard was polite, careful not to look embarrassed for me. The plastic card felt lighter in his hand than it should have. Outside, my phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "This didn't have to happen," it read. Another followed. "You forced my hand." Forced, like the voicemail hadn't been optional. At home, the kitchen table filled with printouts, emails, contracts, call logs. The pattern was obvious now. Each step he'd taken had been small enough to explain away. Together, they formed a path that led exactly where he wanted it to. Daniel flipped through the pages. "This isn't about the wedding," he said. "It started there." No, that was the excuse. Family messages kept coming, softer now, concerned, a warning disguised as support. "Your dad is devastated. He didn't sleep. You should consider what this is doing to him." The phrasing had shifted. I was no longer selfish. I was cruel. One message stood out. A family friend wrote, "You know how he is when he feels cornered." Cornered, as if filing complaints and calling partners was defensive behavior. Another email arrived from HR outlining the review process. Neutral language, clear steps, a reminder not to contact clients or partners during the investigation. Daniel pointed to the screen. "He timed this well," he said. Of course he did. Silence and avoidance had been my default response. It kept things calm. It kept people comfortable. That approach had just cost me my job access and my reputation in one move. The phone rang again. Richard's name lit up the screen. "I hope you understand why I did this," he said when I answered. "I understand what you did," I replied. "That's not the same thing." He paused, then spoke like he was offering advice. "If you cooperate, this can end quietly." Quietly. The word showed up again, offered like a favor. The call ended without resolution. The line went dead, but the implication stayed. Daniel gathered the papers into a single stack. "You can't wait this out," he said. "I know." The building access app sent a final notification confirming my credentials were disabled. The badge sat useless on the table. As evening settled in, I picked it up, turned it over once, and slipped it into my bag while Daniel watched, already pulling up the next set of documents. The apartment felt unfamiliar once the door closed. Boxes from the wedding sat unopened near the wall, gifts still wrapped, cards stacked in a neat pile that no longer felt urgent. The badge from work rested on the counter, useless plastic next to a set of keys I kept forgetting to move. Being placed on leave sounded temporary when HR said it. Living with it felt different. There was no inbox to check, no system to log into, no distraction that came with pretending everything was normal. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was exposed. The first thing that became clear was how long silence had been my strategy. Not confrontation, not refusal. Silence. It showed up early, years before the wedding. Whenever Richard compared me to my sister, the explanation was always ready. "She's struggling. She needs more time." You understand, right? Understanding became a reflex. It felt mature, reasonable. Each time I nodded, something got smaller, but it never felt dramatic enough to address. Silence worked because it kept things smooth. No arguments, no scenes, no consequences. That habit followed me into adulthood. At work, it meant letting results speak instead of correcting assumptions. At home, it meant answering questions about contracts and partnerships, while questions about my actual life went unasked. Looking back, the pattern was obvious. Richard never asked if I was happy. He asked who we were working with. He asked how long contracts lasted. He asked whether certain partnerships were exclusive. Those conversations always happened casually, usually framed as interest or pride. "You're doing well," he'd say. "Must be nice to be in demand." I'd answered without thinking. Not because he was entitled to the information, but because explaining boundaries felt unnecessary. He was family. He wouldn't misuse it. That belief had stayed intact longer than it deserved. The wedding was supposed to be neutral ground, personal, separate. I believed that if I kept my head down and handled everything quietly, there would be nothing to argue about. Silence would smooth it over again. Instead, it had cleared the path. Daniel arrived that evening with takeout and a manila folder. No commentary, no pep talk. He spread the papers across the table and slid one document forward. "This came from an older file," he said. "From where?" "A partner audit." The paper was a signed letter. Richard's signature sat at the bottom, familiar and confident. It introduced me as a point of contact for family-related partnerships. The language was careful, helpful, entirely unauthorized. He used this before, Daniel said. Used it how? To open doors, not illegally, strategically. The letter explained everything without explaining anything at all. Richard hadn't needed access to my systems. He didn't need passwords. He needed credibility. Family ties had given him that. Silence had done the rest. The realization didn't come with anger. It came with clarity. This wasn't about feelings. It wasn't about respect. It was about leverage. Every time I'd stayed quiet, the space had been filled for me. The cost of moving forward was obvious. This wouldn't end with an apology and a reset. Challenging this meant challenging the version of the family that relied on me staying agreeable. It meant accepting that relationships built on access would collapse once access was removed. Daniel waited while I read through the rest of the documents. Old introductions. Email threads where Richard positioned himself as a facilitator. None of it was explosive on its own. Together, it showed intent. "Once you submit this," he said, "you don't get to control how they react." I already don't. That part didn't need debate. My phone buzzed again, a missed call from my mother. No voicemail, just the notification, sitting there like an expectation. She wasn't calling to ask what I needed. She was calling to manage damage. That role had been consistent. I hadn't noticed because it never looked aggressive. The table filled with sorted stacks, contracts, emails, call logs. Each pile had a purpose now. This wasn't about winning an argument. It was about placing information where it belonged and letting it speak. Silence had protected everyone else long enough. The missed call notification stayed on the screen as another document slid into place. I didn't return it. There would be time for conversations later, after the facts were no longer optional. For now, the work was clear. The update from legal came in before noon, marked supplemental. Richard hadn't waited for the family meeting. He'd sent more documents directly to the partner, then forwarded confirmation to my company like a courtesy. The tone was cooperative, concerned, prepared. Daniel read through the attachments first. His jaw tightened in a way I hadn't seen yet. "He's been busy," he said. The files weren't dramatic, no threats, no outbursts, just history. Old emails where Richard positioned himself as a connector, introductions framed as favors, messages written years apart but consistent in tone. He'd never claimed authority outright. He'd implied proximity. One document stood out, a message from a regional partner thanking Richard for continuing the relationship through Claire. The phrasing was careful. It assumed consent without stating it. That assumption had been doing a lot of work. The investigation shifted almost immediately. HR sent a follow-up outlining new scope, more partners, a broader review. The language stayed neutral, but the direction was clear. This was no longer about one wedding or one hotel. It never had been. Richard called an hour later. "You're taking this too far," he said. "You filed a complaint." I protected myself. There it was again. Not family, not principal, himself. You've always benefited from my reputation, he continued. I built my own, not without help. The call ended before I could respond. He didn't wait for agreement. Another message arrived from Daniel while I stared at the screen. One of the witnesses changed their statement. A colleague from operations, someone I'd trusted, had clarified that they might have misunderstood earlier interactions. Family involvement was complex. Lines could blur. It was an easy retreat. It didn't accuse me directly. It didn't need to. The effect was immediate. Legal suspended my access to archived files pending review. The folder Daniel and I had been building went partially dark. Originals were still there, but links broke. Metadata disappeared. The ground shifted under information I'd been counting on. That's deliberate, Daniel said. They're slowing you down. He is. Everything Richard had done fit a pattern now. He hadn't lashed out when hurt. He hadn't demanded apologies. He'd waited for moments where my silence made things easier. Easier to speak for me. Easier to represent me. Easier to slide into rooms I wasn't watching. His interest in my work made sense. Not pride, access. The wedding hadn't triggered this. It had interrupted it. HR scheduled a check-in call. The rep sounded sympathetic but careful. We understand this is stressful, she said. What's changed? Additional information has come to light. From whom? The complainant. The word complainant sounded absurd attached to a man who'd missed my wedding by choice. After the call, Daniel leaned back and folded his arms. He's not trying to win emotionally, he said. No, he's trying to outlast you. Family messages returned with new urgency. My mother asked why I wouldn't just cooperate. An aunt suggested I was risking my future. Someone else wrote that Richard was only trying to help and didn't deserve this level of scrutiny. Scrutiny. The word tasted different when applied to him. A text from Richard came through minutes later. This would all go away if you admitted you crossed a line. Admitted. Not discussed, not clarified. Admitted. The phone stayed face down after that. Daniel pulled up a timeline on his tablet, layering emails and introductions across years. The scope widened with each swipe. Hotels, event spaces, consultants, all tangential, all benefiting from his proximity to me. He's been trading on your credibility, Daniel said. For how long? Long enough to forget it wasn't his. The realization didn't bring panic. It brought adjustment. The strategy I'd been using assumed he was reacting. He wasn't. He was managing. Legal sent another notification late afternoon. The final review date had moved up. 3 days. The email framed it as efficiency. Daniel exhaled slowly. That's tight. It's meant to be. The access loss, the witness shift, the accelerated timeline, it all pointed the same way. Richard wasn't trying to prove anything new. He was trying to close the window before I could. My phone lit up again. This time it was a voicemail from my mother. Please, she said, he's scared. Scared people didn't prepare dossiers. They didn't coordinate statements. They didn't understand partner escalation procedures well enough to use them. The documents on the table felt thinner now, but clearer. This wasn't a misunderstanding to be corrected. It was a system to be exposed. Daniel tapped the calendar where the new deadline glowed. Next move has to count, he said. The notification chimed again, confirming the revised end date of the investigation, while my inbox refreshed and removed another thread I'd been about to open. The conference room was already full when I arrived. Legal sat on one side, partners on the other. Richard had chosen a seat near the end of the table, close enough to speak, far enough to look restrained. He nodded once when he saw me, like this was a meeting he'd scheduled. I took the chair opposite him. Daniel stayed back, not part of the table, just close enough to pass documents when needed. The lead attorney opened by summarizing the complaint. Clean language, neutral tone, misuse of position, personal benefit, risk exposure. Richard listened with his hands folded, expression steady. When it was my turn, I didn't start with explanations. I'd like to present materials, I said. The attorney paused, then nodded. I slid the first folder across the table. Contracts, emails, letters, each one marked and dated. The paper made a soft sound as it moved, louder than expected in the room. "These are partnership agreements processed through my company," I said. "They predate my wedding. None of them were initiated by me for personal use." One of the partners flipped through the pages, slower than necessary. Richard leaned forward. "I was helping my daughter," he said. "She was busy. I stepped in." No one interrupted him. He'd always spoken comfortably in rooms like this. "I never asked for that," I replied. "You benefited," he said. "That doesn't make it consent." The attorney raised a hand. "Let's stay focused." The second set went out. Email threads, introductions, the same phrasing repeated over years. "Claire will handle this," looping Claire in, through Claire. Richard smiled, small and patient. "You're reading intention where there wasn't any," he said. I was proud of her. This was support. The word support sounded generous enough to blur everything else. I nodded once and reached for the last item. "This is a recorded call," I said. "It was made 2 years ago. I was present." Richard's posture shifted, just slightly. The attorney hesitated. "Was this disclosed?" "Yes," I said. "It was recorded legally." The audio filled the room without ceremony. Richard's voice sounded relaxed, almost casual. "As long as they think I'm still the link through Claire, the relationship stays warm," he said on the recording. "No need to complicate it." The room didn't react all at once. It stalled. Someone cleared their throat. A pen stopped moving. Richard leaned back. "That's taken out of context," he said. "Is it?" one of the partners asked. Silence settled differently now, not tense, assessing. The attorney looked down at the notes. "Mr. Morgan," she said, "can you clarify your role with these partners?" "I don't have a formal role," Richard said. "Then why were you representing Access?" "I wasn't representing, I was facilitating." Another pause. "So you weren't authorized," the attorney said. "I was a parent," he replied. "Those aren't the same thing." Someone near the window asked, not unkindly, "Are you currently representing anyone else through your daughter?" The question wasn't meant as a joke. It landed anyway. Richard didn't answer immediately. Daniel passed me one more page, a timeline summary. I slid it forward without comment. The attorney read it, then looked up. "The complaint appears to rely on overlap created by the complainant," she said, "not by Ms. Morgan." Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. The partner nearest him adjusted his glasses. "This changes our exposure," he said. The attorney nodded. "The complaint will be dismissed," she said. "Additionally, we'll be initiating a separate review regarding unauthorized representation." The phrase "separate review" carried weight. It moved the problem off my side of the table. Richard stood halfway, then sat back down. "This isn't necessary," he said. "It already happened," the attorney replied. The meeting shifted into procedural language after that, timelines, next steps, notices. I stayed quiet, not because I had nothing to say, but because there was nothing left to add. As people gathered their papers, Richard finally looked at me. "You didn't have to do this," he said. The statement didn't ask for agreement. It assumed regret. I slid my chair back and stood. "You filed the complaint," I said. The attorney called the meeting adjourned. Folders closed, chairs moved, the room emptied in stages. Richard stayed seated, watching the table like it might offer another option. Daniel handed me my copy of the dismissal notice. It was warm from the printer. The attorney caught up to us near the door. "Your access will be restored pending final review," she said, "and you may want separate counsel." That was new and necessary. Behind us, Richard's phone buzzed. He didn't answer it. The hallway lights reflected off the glass walls as people passed, already discussing what came next, while I stepped aside to read the first line of the notice again, the words still settling into place. The next morning started with logistics. Legal confirmed the dismissal in writing. IT restored access with a short apology and no explanation. A partner emailed to say they appreciated my professionalism during a difficult situation. No one mentioned my father by name. At work, the tone had shifted. People spoke normally again. A few avoided the topic entirely, which felt like progress. HR offered options, framed as support. One role involved less external exposure and more internal oversight. It came with a new title and fewer introductions. I accepted it without negotiation. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Less visibility," he said. "More boundaries," I replied. That afternoon, my mother called. I answered this time. "He's not taking calls," she said. "I know. He doesn't understand how it happened so fast." "He filed a complaint," I said. "Yes, but—" She stopped herself. The silence stretched, then shifted. "Can you come by?" she asked. "For a minute?" I drove over without rushing. The house looked the same. Trimmed lawn, lights on, familiar enough to feel distant. Richard sat on the couch when I walked in. The television was off. His phone rested face down on the coffee table, untouched. My mother hovered near the doorway, unsure where to stand. No one offered coffee. "You didn't have to do that," Richard said, not looking up. "You did this," I replied. He shook his head once like he'd lost track of the argument. "I was trying to help," he said. "You were trying to stay relevant." The word landed flat, not cruel, accurate. My mother shifted. "Can we not do this now?" she asked. I nodded. That wasn't what I'd come for. "I'm not filing anything else," I said. "I'm not calling anyone. I just wanted you to know I'm done." Richard finally looked up. "With what?" "With explaining." He stared at me, then back at the floor. There was no outburst, no apology, just confusion settling into something heavier. I placed my spare key on the table. The metal clicked softly against the wood. "You can keep it," my mother said quickly. "I don't need it," I replied. She nodded, understanding more than she said. On the drive home, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Family members asking if everything was okay. Someone had told them the complaint was dismissed. No one asked why it existed in the first place. At a stoplight, I blocked the group chat. One by one, the notifications stopped. Back at the apartment, Daniel was waiting with dinner and a raised brow. "How'd it go?" "It ended." That night, I organized the last of the documents: contracts, emails, transcripts. I scanned what needed to be saved and archived the rest. The folder name came easily. Family Event, Austin. It felt accurate enough to be funny, just not out loud. The next few days passed without drama. Richard didn't call. Partners didn't either. The investigation concluded formally with a short memo and no further action required on my end. The separate review moved forward without my involvement. At work, the new role settled in. Fewer meetings, more control. No introductions made on my behalf. My mother texted once. "He's embarrassed." I didn't respond. Forgiveness wasn't the goal. Distance was. A week later, I changed my emergency contact, updated passwords, adjusted privacy settings I'd never bothered with before. It took less time than expected. On Sunday evening, I unpacked the last wedding gift, a picture frame. I set it aside unopened and focused on the empty space it left behind. Before bed, I checked my phone. No missed calls, no new messages, just silence that didn't ask anything from me. The spare key from my father's house sat on the counter, exactly where I'd left it. I picked it up, turned it over once, then placed it near the door. After that, the lights went off, room by room. The lock clicked from the inside. The key stayed where it was as I stepped away, letting the door settle closed behind me without checking it again.